Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Pilot Officer Ebony Braddon. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Harold Esam. Harold Esam was born in 1894 in Warrnambool, Victoria, the sixth son born to Samuel and Catherine Esam. His father was an engineer who passed away in 1915. Little is known of Esam's childhood. However, in his adult years, he worked as a labourer and then was later employed by Kennedy's & Co.'s chemist in Timor Street, Warrnambool. Harold Esam enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 7th of July, 1915, at the age of 21. Assigned to the 31st Battalion, he spent 3 months training at Broadmeadows Camp before embarking from Melbourne aboard the troops' ship Wandilla in November. Esam reached Egypt in December 1915, and his battalion joined the 5th Division. He arrived on the Western Front in June 1916 and had served just 3 days in the frontline trenches before taking part in his first major battle near the French village of Fromelles. The battle began on the 19th of July, with Australian troops tasked with attacking the German front line surrounding the Sugarloaf salient. The heavily manned salient extended outwards into no man's land, offering the enemy a position from which they could fire at advancing troops from multiple directions. Bombardment of the enemy lines took place for 3 days before the beginning of the battle. The Allies were confident that the enemy had not survived and they could easily capture their objectives. Unfortunately, the bombardment signalled to the enemy to anticipate an attack, allowing them time to prepare for the onslaught. The enemy had survived the shelling and were able to quickly man their machine guns and begin their own bombardment once the shells stopped falling. The advancing Allied troops walked into a relentless hail of machine gun fire, which decimated several waves of Australian soldiers almost instantly. The German front line was eventually captured, but owing to the overall failure of the battle, the troops were forced to withdraw. In just one night, Australian casualties stood at a staggering 5,533 killed, missing, or wounded. Official war historian Charles Bean labelled the attack the worst 24 hours in Australian history. In the chaos of the onslaught, hundreds of men went missing. Among them was Private Harold Esam. Initially reported missing, his identity disc was later returned from Germany, suggesting that he'd been killed in action and buried by the enemy. His comrade, Private Collings, wrote to Esam's family to describe his final moments. He was in my company and in the charge on the evening of 19th of July, 1916. He was hit beside me and I think killed, as he never uttered a word. Just after, I myself was wounded as we were under very heavy artillery and machine gun fire. I crawled into a shell hole and did not see Harold again. The following morning, when I was taken prisoner, a German gave me a piece of paper with his address on. So, if you have not heard from him, he's gone to the great place where there are no wars. Private Harold Esam was 22 years old. His body was not recovered until 92 years later, when, in 2008, a mass grave was discovered at Pheasant Wood, just outside Fromelles. Excavation of the site discovered the remains of 250 Allied soldiers who had been lost during the fighting at Fromelles. Esam's remains were exhumed and reinterred at Pheasant Wood Military Cemetery in France. Identification of his remains was made possible by DNA testing of his descendants, who chose the following inscription on his final resting place: "Sleep peacefully, Harold. We honour your sacrifice, lest we forget." His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is just one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Harold Esam, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.